Hi class, so today we're officially starting our first reading unit, which is our fiction unit called Interpreting Characters, the Heart of the Story. I'm so excited for the ideas you're going to be developing in fourth grade this year, starting right now. Now, I know you've had ideas about books before, but this year is not going to be like any other. This year, you're going to be building substantial ideas that are grounded in evidence and not just little lightweight ideas that are barely connected to the book and blown away in the breeze. This year, you're going to build ideas that last, that are defensible, that are sturdy, and grounded in the text. So today, we are learning how to read intensely. We're going to build a foundation to grow our ideas. So here's today's teaching point. Today I want to teach you that to grow solid, grounded ideas, people read intensely. They're aware that everything counts. Every part of the book is important. They often even reread to see more and notice more. Readers use all their brain power and strategies to pay extra attention to what they are reading. So here are some tips for reading intensely to grow ideas. First, find a book that you want to read. Read as if you are in the book. So really put yourself in the main character's shoes. Work hard to figure out confusing parts. Don't just drift along. If you're confused, make sure you're trying to figure out why. And also, of course, make notes of things to talk about later. You may have in the past with past teachers, maybe did stop and jots, right? So this year in fourth grade as well, we'll be stopping and jotting as we read our independent reading books, and I'll be doing with our read aloud book. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to be talking about how to stop and jot. So good readers stop when they're reading and jot about what they wonder. So if you're questioning something, you want to know something, you could start your jotting with I wonder, or I have a question about, or how, why. You also want to stop and jot about things that you're thinking while you're reading. So you could start with I think blank, so tell what you think, because blank, so something happened in the story that made you think that. You could use the sentence starter I predict that, so something that you think might happen because of something that happened in the story. You also want to stop and jot things that you feel. So maybe something happened in your story that you didn't like or that you did like, and saying why it made you feel that way. You could start with reading this part and then telling how it made you feel. Also, another thing to do to stop and jot, you could connect to the story. Maybe it reminds you of something. And also, you could take notes on what the character might be thinking. So the character thinks something because, and explain why you think they're thinking that. So these are some great sentence starters, things that you should be jotting while you're reading. So I'm going to show you an example of how to stop and jot by going back into our read aloud book called The Tiger Rising. And I'm going to go back to chapter 1 in the first couple pages. And I'm going to read a little bit, and I'm going to show you how I stopped and jotted on this sticky note. So when you're stopping and jotting, if you had sticky notes, you could do that while you're reading. But I did give you guys a reading notebook. I'll explain later more, where you can take notes while you're reading during your independent reading time. So I just did an example on a sticky note. So I'm going to go back to page 3 of the read aloud and just read a little bit. So it says, and he did not think about his mother. He hadn't thought about her since the morning of the funeral. The morning he couldn't stop crying, the great heaving sobs that made his chest and stomach hurt. His father, watching him, standing beside him, had started to cry too. So I'm going to stop, and what I would do is I would jot down the note. I wonder how Rob's mom died, because that's where we've just found out. They went to her funeral. She passed away. So as a reader, we're probably wondering what happened. All right, so I'm going to keep reading a little bit. They were both dressed up in suits that day. His father's suit was too small, and when he slapped Rob to make him stop crying, he ripped a hole underneath the arm of his jacket. "There ain't no point in crying," his father had said afterward. "Crying ain't going to bring her back." It had been 6 months since that day. 6 months since he and his father had moved from Jacksonville to Lister, and Rob had not cried since. Not once. So as a reader, I'm going to pause and think about this for a second. Thinking about how Rob, now because of that moment, never cries. Never. So I stopped and jotted the note. I think Rob never cries because his dad told him there's no point in crying because it doesn't change anything. So as the story goes on, anytime Rob feels super emotional, he never cries, just because he remembers back to that moment that his father told him, well, it doesn't change anything, so why do it? All right, we'll read a little bit more. The final thing he did not think about that morning was getting onto the bus. He specifically did not think about Norton and Billy Threemonger waiting for him like chained and starved guard dogs, eager to attack. Rob had a way of not thinking about things. So my last note that I took about this section, this part made me feel bad for Rob because he feels like he shouldn't grieve the loss of his mother. And even so that he feels like he can't even think about her. And so to me, I feel really bad for him because if you lose someone, it's important to remember them and think of happy times. And he tries to not think about her at all because it's so painful and hard for him to even think about. So those were some notes that I stopped and jotted while I was reading. So just to give you guys an example of some things that you might want to write down while you're reading your own books, things you're wondering, things you're thinking, things you're feeling. Okay, so that brings us to your independent reading time. So you're going to stop and jot during your independent reading today. You're going to go to the reading folder that we created in your drive. So to find that, go to your drive by clicking on the waffle, click on drive, and you're going to open the reading folder. I put in a document in there for you called your reading notebook, and that's where you can take notes while you're reading your independent books. And this will be where you stop and jot. So happy reading, and don't forget when you are taking notes, you should write the date, write in complete sentences, and try your best spelling. Use details from the story. So those are important tips for note taking while you're reading your independent books.